So tonight we are talking about sales and setting up a sales program for you as a startup organization. So first of all, let me give you a little bit of my contact information and context. I work here as an executive in residence, as a coach for some of the tech community in Ace Tech, and have spent my career prior to coming to BC in retiring, or not retiring here, but changing jobs, changing careers here into a coaching role. Prior to that, I'd run a number of companies as CEOs, turning around technology companies, and did that after a few startups in the telecom world and about almost 20 years with larger companies, GE and Bell Canada in their mobile communications division. They were great training grounds, but the fun right now is really I'm living vicariously through all you young entrepreneurs that have exciting new ideas and startup ventures, and hopefully I can help you get up and on your way. I also act as a small angel investor, a number of companies that I'm hoping are wildly successful over the next few years, and continue to look for other investments in partnership with the eFund, which is a group of angels that get together and invest in companies, and also some that I invest in directly on my own. So tonight, the objectives for the seminar are really to look at the role of sales in a startup, which is a little bit unique. It's not a very different role than in a large organization. Secondly, talk about the investors' expectations of what are they looking for in terms of your sales program, sales, and various sales information. Talk a little bit about the language of sales, and then really look at what's sales versus business development and marketing, and really try to put sales into context with the rest of the activities that we've talked about. Some key learning concepts that we want to talk about is really buying versus selling. The more buying that we can get done without doing any selling is better because it's a lot cheaper. You're going to learn that personalities are everywhere. B2B really means P2P. Got to talk about the value chain. What's in it for me? Got to understand those buyer types. And what's your product being hired to do? What job is it being done? Is your product actually doing for your client? We have to look at the differences between digital media sales activities and enterprise sales activities. And enterprise does not mean selling product. It could be a SaaS sale to an enterprise. It just means you're selling to a much larger client. And thirdly, how do you keep yourself on track? Or lastly, how do you keep yourself on track? You can only manage what you measure. So let's have a little fun here. Typical sales call. Here's my entrepreneur, and it says, hey, look at this really cool whatchamacallit that I've got out there. And the Mr. Customer says, well, neat, but what does it do? And the entrepreneur says, oh yeah, I can do this and that, and it can really even do this. Maybe even do your toast. Oh, but does it have any benefits? Like, it's faster. Why do I need it faster? Now? Huh? Finally, the technology entrepreneur might sort of say, I'm not getting it. What's going on? Why doesn't he buy it? And it's really because the approach is from the product to the customer, to the user. I've got this cool thing that I've invented, and I'm now trying to push it on you. And that is totally the wrong approach. We have to really look at it from the customer's perspective. I've got this really big issue, this big problem, and I've got to get it solved, and I've got to get it solved now. All right? So your jobs as startups, I think you've probably been told that you're a temporary institution. A startup is a temporary institution searching for a repeatable, scalable sales process so that you can actually be profitable in the long term and sustainable in the long term. And you're a temporary institution until you're profitable and sustainable. And if we actually look at it from the customer's perspective, there are tons of problems out there that need to be solved. Really big problems. Some of them massive problems that take lots of money. Some of them not so massive that take a little bit of money that you can get your hands around and quickly get into it. So I really encourage you, because we're talking about sales, I'm not talking about so much selling as I am talking about solving the customer's problem. And that's what the salesperson's role is they are the intermediary between the customer's problem and the company that they work for, and trying to make that match. So some key considerations for your sales program. Most technology entrepreneurs say, can I just get a VP of sales, hire a VP of sales, get some investor money, and he'll go out and he'll actually get to do the customer stuff, customer-facing stuff, because I like the technology. I don't really like talking to customers. They whine and they complain and whatever. Secondly is, what really is a sale? Who are you selling to? Who's the buyer? Is there one, or is there a couple of them? How will you sell, and what's your sales strategy? And how can you measure your progress? So who does sales? I think you're probably all familiar with the 4 steps to epiphany from Steve Blank, and the customer development process. Been talked about, heard about it, whatnot. And if you map that onto the technology adoption life cycle, we have the innovators and the early adopters, and we have this big chasm, and then we have the early majority before we get into the pragmatists out there. And so I think most, given that it's New Ventures BC, I'm going to assume that everybody is back over here in the customer discovery phase, hopefully, and customer validation phase before you're trying to really ramp up the sales activity. There's no other person to do that job than the CEO. You as a founder, CEO, whatever title you want to carry, you're the creator of it, you're the architect of the business, you've got the vision, you have to talk to customers, you have to be the salesman. There isn't any way around that. As you move along, and once you get past the customer validation, that means you've got a product, you've proven that you can actually sell it for a profit. You can actually sell a couple of them for a profit. In fact, you're starting to get traction now. Now you can actually bring on, because you're going to exit out of the customer validation and try to cross the chasm, you can bring on a business development guy. And then when you're really trying to grow, that's when you want to have a VP sales that can take things on. So look nowhere else other than at yourself to begin with to get it right and figure out your way of how to get across this chasm. Okay, it's not something that can be delegated. So get comfortable with sales. It's the key to your success of your new venture. So I'm just going to give you the guru here, Mr. Steve
Now,
Blank.
one of the interesting things about customer development that makes startups very different from large companies is that customer development is done by the founders. Well, why the founders? It turns out that there's a couple of interesting things, and this is about human nature. There's no technology involved. In a traditional startup in the old days, you would hire a VP of sales who would go out because you were smart, this was your idea, and you'd say, go try to sell this, go talk to customers. I'll just hire somebody to do this. But remember, an employee doesn't have the vision. They're just executing what you told them. And guess what happens if they go out and talk to people who say, this is the worst idea we ever heard, or no, we won't buy it. What happens is they'll come back and tell you, and the first time they do this, you'll say, well, you're just not describing it right. And you send them back out for another couple of days or weeks or months, and they'll come back again. And if you're like any passionate founder, you'll go, I hired the wrong executive, you're fired. Now just imagine we run the exercise, this time not with a proxy, a head of sales or marketing, but we force you to get out, you the founder, to start talking to customers. And if you got that same exact feedback, it might take you 3 customers or 5 or 30, but eventually smoke will start coming out of your ears because cognitive dissonance is now coming into effect, is that you might realize that your story or vision isn't right. But unlike a proxy, a VP of sales or marketing, you have the power to change the company's strategy. You have the power to change the entire value proposition to say, well, what if we had these features? And customers might say, nah, still not. But then if you said, well, what if we had this? They might say, oh, if you could do that, you could have my check right now. Now, if you're a smart founder, you'd say, let me get right back to you. Because what you'll do is you'll go test that new feature with 5 or 10 other customers. And all of a sudden, you realize that you had the wrong feature set. And just by adding this small little change, you could now actually get a whole series of paying customers. Only founders could do that. And what we did in the past is we would wait to first customer ship, we'd wait till sales didn't match the revenue plan, and we'd actually make these changes by firing executives, instead of actually having the founders engaged in day one. So it's the founder who could change the product, make pivots, and hear customer feedback firsthand. And that's the idea of getting the founder outside the building.
I think Steve makes it pretty clear, right, that the big benefit that you have is that you have the vision, you have the authority to actually change the direction of the company. And that's what's needed in the early stage, because you are in search of the right solution to a customer's problems. And it's only through that rapid iteration that you're going to be able to outrun the competition in order to get into the marketplace and develop your competitive advantage better and faster than the next guy. All right, so when the founder is out there talking to customers, you get direct market feedback on your pain hypothesis, the positioning that you've developed, which is also identifying the value of your solution. You're getting specific direct feedback on the product and the market, the fit between the two of them, which I think Dave Thomas went through for you. And very importantly, you're getting very direct feedback on who else is out there. What's the competition doing? What are they operating? What are they iterating on? Which direction are they going? How can you actually create a better product for the market than anybody else that's out there in the market today? So it's the fastest way, by you taking command of that sales, of that customer discussion, that early stage, in the early stages of your company, it's the fastest way to a repeatable, scalable sales process to achieve profitability and sustainability. So let's just go back over, I'm going to say, the first 4 seminars that were provided by New Ventures BC, hosted by Angie. And the first one by Ralph Turfus, he really focused on the pain of the customer. What are they experiencing in the target market? What differentiation are you offering relative to other competitive? And gave you a little bit of a sales primer. The second one with Dave Thomas talked about segmentation, how you carve out portions of the market because the whole market is not the same. The value of some market research, the buying processes, some positioning and pricing tactics, and also some communication tactics and metrics. With Stephen, he talked about the business model, the role of business model, the importance of a business model, and how you can innovate on the business model. And the business model is the definition of how you create value for customers and capture value for shareholders. And with Mike, he really was talking about the investor world. And one of his the most important questions he said that an investor would ask you is, who will buy, why will they buy, and how much will they buy? So this really talks more to the value side. This is all about your value in the marketplace, the value of your product, right? It's not really talking about the sales side. So that's why there's a role for me in these seminar series. So let's look at what is a sale. What does a sale actually mean? So a sale is an agreement of value between a buyer and a seller. And the 2 key words here are agreement and value. Previous 3 or 4 sessions, we talked a lot about value. You didn't talk about the agreement. The agreement is the sales role. Agreement requires a relationship which is a function of awareness and trust. The value is a function of need and the fit of your solution to the need of the client. So the sales role then is closing that agreement. That is really what we're going to focus on tonight. And you hear a lot of buzz talk about, my business is B2B, my business is B2C, my business is B to B to C, to B to B to whatever, right? Blah, 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 on and on and on. But really, when it comes down to it, it's all P to P. People sell to people. Businesses don't sell to businesses. Businesses don't sell, people do. Businesses don't buy, people do. Okay, the seller's got to understand all of the WIFMs, all of the buyers that are out there in the buying process, because there's in a large company maybe many, many people that have an actual influence on whether or not you get that agreement, which is based on trust and awareness. As I mentioned earlier, the salesman role is, or a sales role, is to be that connection, that intermediary between the company and the customer to enable that transaction to happen. You can create all the products that have wonderful perceived value all over the place. Unless you actually create and close sales, you don't have revenue, you don't really have a business. You have to get the agreement from everybody. Okay, so in the WIFM, what's in it for me? It can be anything from hard dollars to issues of security for my children. It can be a job promotion if I'm in the bowels of a large organization and I'm trying to get a project through. And it can be increased status with my friends because I'm getting likes or I'm getting Facebook recognition or whatever for what I've just purchased. For that matter, maybe it's the hot car that I have in my driveway. So every buyer in the process can say no. So it's the salesperson's job to basically find the way through the sales process so that you get tick marks for yes, yes, or at least you get a neutral so that they're not saying no. There are many people that don't really have a yes vote, but they do have a no vote. They have a veto on you selling or you completing and getting your agreement. So getting the agreement or closing the sale. Okay, first of all, creating awareness. I think Dave touched on this, some of his communications plans of how you can promote and through various forms of communications, whether it's PR, whether it's advertising or social media, trade shows, articles, blogs. There's lots of different ways of doing it. It takes time. It doesn't happen instantaneously. But you also need to be aware of your customers. So that's the creating awareness is going out and understanding, giving your message out to the marketplace. And it's great if your market is right on track, because if you communicate out to the marketplace clearly about what problems you're solving and people are looking for solutions to those problems, you don't have to do a whole lot of, quote, selling, because people will come to you. The customers end up doing a lot of buying. You don't have to do a whole lot of selling. Wonderful. That's the cheapest way that you could possibly sell. And that's the value of good positioning, is that you minimize the amount of sales effort that you actually have to do. Customers are looking for you. Okay, so good positioning, good awareness of what your message is out in the marketplace. So you need to know and be aware of your customers. So it's creating awareness on both sides. It's not just a push. It's also you going out and seeking from them information. What are their concerns? What's the competition doing? What's the context in which they're looking for a solution? What's the context in which they're looking for a solution? In other words, have they just had a litigation which you're going to solve if your product came out there? Are they coming to the end of the contract and therefore they want to buy something automatically? You know, is the consumer just had some bad thing happen and your product just might solve or prevent that from happening again? Right? So what's the context upon which somebody is going to go out and search for your product? You know, if you're a shoe salesman, you would have known that you could have sold a pair of shoes to Joe Oliver last week. Right? Because every time there's a budget, there's a pair of shoes sold by the guy. So the second key element is building trust. Building trust as a new venture starts with your customer discovery. It actually starts in those conversations that you have that should be very open conversations, open-ended. In other words, I hear you might have this problem. Please describe it for me. How did it happen? Why did it happen that way? Have you ever had this problem before? How often have you had? How does it make you feel when that happens? All those types of open conversations that you've learned from the customer discovery activity that will engage the customer to give you more color around what their problem is, so that you can fit a much better solution. You're building trust when you're getting by having a conversation with them and getting a confirmation of the actual value of your product offering. By creating and doing demonstrations once you've got a prototype, once you've got something working. You're actually showing that you can solve the problem, and you're getting feedback. You're building trust when you're getting likes on Facebook, or when you're getting letters of reference, or potentially customers agreeing to do a case study of the application of your product and their solution in solving their problems. And every time your team engages in problem solving with them, you're continuing to build that trust. So the relationship here carries on and on and on, whether it starts out with conversations about what their problems are and you understanding what the context of those problems are. It continues on once you're actually engaged with them in terms of user groups, ongoing problem solving, selling them additional products. And you never want to lose that trust. And there are companies that definitely lose that trust. You can see them going down. They do something that's bad. They do something that destroys the value with their customers. I think we saw, I guess a number of years ago, a tremendous example by Johnson & Johnson when there was the bad issue of tainted Tylenol. And what did they do when that came up? They didn't try to dispute it. They didn't say somebody else did it. They went right out, and in order to sustain trust in their brand, they recalled every single product that was out there and went through it all and then resealed it all properly to ensure that it was not tainted. Okay? There's another example just recently where somebody did a very similar situation, where there was a product, and I can't remember what the brand was, but they followed basically what Johnson & Johnson did. They maintained their level of trust. If they hadn't done that, you would have lost a substantial amount of trust. They would have lost a substantial amount of trust in the marketplace, a lot of value. Trust is something which is slowly built up and very quick to lose, as I'm sure people have experienced at various times in their own lives. So who are you selling to? Who's the who? And we have really two different processes here that we have to think about. One is, where is your product in the ultimate use of the consumer, the person who's consuming it? Second one is, where are you, or how are you actually reaching the customer to sell your product? Is your product being purchased directly from you, through a partner? Do you need some other technical support, installation support, training, whatever to be provided or offered? Maybe it's in a different language. Maybe it's part of another solution. So does it operate, a product operate as a standalone, or are you like a component of a car which goes into a car which you then buy from, from Volkswagen or Ford or GM or somebody like that? So let's just take one example here of you're a producer of seeds, wheat seeds, not the genetically modified. These are really cool seeds, right? And so let's look at the value chain, which is a series of activities which, when combined, it defines an overall business process to deliver value to an end consumer. Let's look at what a guy, if I have seeds, I'm selling to a farmer. That farmer is going to plant the seeds, and I'm going to tell him these are absolutely the best seeds. They're not going to give you a wheat belly and all that other stuff. They're going to grow beautifully. They're hardy. They're going to withstand the Canadian early falls that come out on the prairies or whatever. And then it also really, really mills well. Easy, very simple hull on it. There's no exterior that's going to get in there and cause a problem. And it can be made to actually make the best, beautiful, chewy French loaf around. Hard to find anything like it. Which is going to allow your clients, ultimate clients, to get the absolute best sandwich out there that's going to taste fantastic. So I'm now at the very front end of this value chain. And I actually have to do some explaining all the way down. I'm not selling to the end consumer. But I actually, whatever I do up front with my seeds, I have to think about the end consumer and what the impact is. So this is a fairly complicated value chain, right? You're probably not, a lot of you aren't in that situation, but you could be if you're providing, some feedstock into a clean energy project, or you're providing a component in a much larger product, or you're a component into some sort of life sciences that's affecting things. So let's look at the different ways in which you can get your product or sell your product into the marketplace. The simplest is the direct to the customer, right? There's no middleman. You're talking directly to customers. You're activating them directly. It's your own mechanism for sale. You have total control over the sales process. And you have to provide all the education to the customer of who you are, how they buy, how they trial your product, and get all the feedback. There's one positioning statement for your target market, and away you go. Simplest form of sale. So if you're develops a SaaS application, software as a service application, you could have that on the web. People are buying it directly from your website, and away you go. You might have also produced a product which is that a business buys for their own use, for their own consumption. Again, very simple application, very simple sales model. And a second form is an intermediary, which I'm going to say these days, typically a web property. You've got two different customers. You've got an end user who may or may not be paying something. And you've got a purchaser or payer who probably is carrying most of the freight. You have to have a positioning statement for both. The value proposition to each of these is a different value proposition. You're solving a different problem. Let's look at an example. We have Google. The end user pain is they're trying to find stuff. They're searching, they're looking for stuff. The purchaser pain, the one who's actually paying and supporting Google, people who are advertising. They're trying to sell stuff. Very different value propositions. So that isn't a business model that was created by Google. It's exactly the same business model that newspapers have used for centuries. Google's just doing it electronically. Let's look at another one, the channel sales. So in this case, you've got a widget being, you're Acme products, and your widget is going out to the marketplace. But you actually want to sell it in a place where you don't speak the language. And so you are using that person to import it and sell it in their country. Maybe you're selling it in Malaysia. You don't speak Malay at all. Okay? So you would need to create a positioning statement for your channel partner. Why should they be buying your product and selling your product in Malaysia rather than other people that have similar products, competing products to yours? You have to convince them of that. You also have to do a positioning statement for the end user. You probably already have that for your home market, but you may have to tweak it or modify it slightly as well for your channel partner, wherever you're using your channel partner. Because you have to show him how to sell the product. So using a channel partner does not mean, don't have to do any sales. By no means. You actually have to, a little more complicated, because you have to manage him, the channel partner, and you have to create pull-through. I mean, the most common example of this are retail stores. The Bay, just up the street, they're a channel for all those jean brands that you buy, all the cosmetics brands that you buy, all of the home goods that you buy. Most of the stuff in that store is not their own brand. In fact, most of the stuff is not even on their inventory. All they are is a placement place. And you, as a provider of Levi jeans or whatever, you actually have to advertise and pull through the store your product. Because actually in the store you're competing with a whole bunch of other products. Okay? So there is a middleman. You have two customers. They have a related pain. You need to pay attention to the end user of your product. Here's an example. The channel partner pain here, a convenience store, 7-Eleven, is trying to get thirsty people into the store. Because they know if they get thirsty people into the store, they can sell them a bunch of other stuff. Chips and other drinks and things like that. The purchaser's pain is they're tired and thirsty. So what does Monster has to do is they're competing with Red Bull and the other guys. They have to advertise that you can go and get their product all through the 7-Eleven store. So they drive traffic into their channel partner. It's cheaper than setting up stores just to sell Monster drinks, but it doesn't come for free. Let's look at a little more complex. We have a product roll-up where we've got a product. It's a component into another product. And then that product is sold by a distributor who may have to do installation because it's a complex product at an end user's location. There's lots of middlemen. There's lots of positioning statements. There could be not only 3, there could be 4, depending upon how many layers of complexity there are to the construct of the product. So these are typically high value, complex sales, but they certainly do exist. Many companies right here in Vancouver. I'm sure McDonald Detweiler has a number of very complex sales like this that go on, where they're producing a component which is going into another manufacturer's product, which is going onto a space shuttle or satellite somewhere, which is then being used by some space agency in some location. So let's look at this one. This is a Vancouver company. I think Ralph Turfus is actually involved with this. Redland Technologies, he's a director of Redland. They make a really special material called cadmium zinc telluride. And it's used for imaging, medical imaging and nuclear medicine. So their client that they want to sell to, or one of their clients, is Spectrum Dynamics over in Israel. There you already have a complexity of sale in terms of distance and time zones and things like that. So Spectrum now produces a medical imaging detector, which goes into a GE healthcare imaging system. That imaging system is then sold to VGH here in Vancouver. So it's gone full circle. So the positioning statements that have to come out, everybody in this chain has a different pain, and you've got to provide a different solution. And you have to understand that. Even though you're Redland Technologies, you have to understand how it works all the way down, because if this guy says no, you don't get any farther. You have to show that your value goes right down to the end user. So the manufacturer's pain, which is Spectrum, is looking for a more efficient detector. GE is looking for a more efficient imaging system. The purchaser, who's the hospital, is looking for lower operating costs and higher throughput. And me, the patient, is looking for faster diagnosis with less exposure to radiation. So you have to have your story, your positioning, all the way through. And as a salesperson, you have to understand all of these different innuendos, all these different implications all the way through. So many people, I'm going to say, almost produce many people. There are other companies out which produce sort of like a platform technology or a product that can be used in many different places. And that's, in some ways, a form of a innovator or a founder's dilemma. I don't know which shiny object, which shiny market I should be going after first or next. I can do all of these things. I think, as Ralph probably alluded to, and probably Dave reinforced, and I'm sure Stephen probably commented on as well, is you have to focus in and understand exactly and define your pain on a market-by-market basis. So here you have one product which can serve many different, or provide many different solutions out in the marketplace, but those solutions are unrelated to each other. So you have to talk to each one of these. You can talk to each one of these customers, and you need your own sales mechanism, but you need very different sales and different value propositions for each one. So here's an example of one, a laser cutter. A 3D printer would be probably a similar one if you're came out and produced a 3D printer. So this laser cutter, it can do a bunch of different things. It can produce a 3D architectural model up there in the upper corner. It can carve out decorative pieces of wood. It can do some really fancy cutting of card material down the lower right. And it can also create some decals or things that you put on put on clothing with different colors and all sorts of things. So how do you approach this? Well, the architect needs an accurate 3D model, right? So that's very different than the craftsperson who is looking for something very intricate, very repetitive engraving. Like, the architect's only doing this model once, right? But it's very accurate, you can do it quickly, etc. The card maker is looking for reducing labor so that he can produce a whole bunch of cards pretty quickly, high quality, from good, heavy cardstock. And the clothing designer is looking at hard-to-cut materials that he can bang out very quickly, repetitively, without error, without losing or a lot of wastage in terms of the product that he's cutting. So how's the customer going to buy your product? Right? There's a number of different models of how you can go to market to sell it. Do you need somebody to help you sell it? Do you need somebody to do an installation? Is your product way up the food chain? Are you a component in something else? So are you directly? Are you selling a two-sided model where you've got somebody paying for it and a free user over here benefiting? So are you sort of a marketplace? Or you need an intermediary, you're acting as an intermediary? Do you need a channel partner? Do you need a channel partner to help you engage people out there in the marketplace? Language differences, regulatory differences. Maybe you just want their brand to actually help you sell because you can feel you can get more growth that way. Or are you a product roll-up? Are you a complex product like the imaging system, which is using the special material? Or the Swiss Army knife that can do a whole bunch of different things. So who, or maybe more appropriately, how many people do you actually need to be selling to? And that's a really important question for the salesperson. Because as I said, you've got to get every single person on there not saying no. You don't have to get them all. Only one person actually has to say yes. It's the person that writes the check. But you need to make sure that you don't have a no. And you could have many people that have a say in the buying process. And you need to be selling those. So the role of sales is really finding out who all those people are that you need to talk to in order to get that vote of confidence. So which strategy should you choose? So I just threw up a couple of things here. You could probably make a pretty long list. You'd be squinting pretty hard to look at the different elements here. But the direct, so I've got on the top your brand, whatever brand name you're operating under. And then on the right-hand column, I referred to as an OEM or white label strategy. So an OEM white label strategy is really that multi-layered product like Redland Technologies where they're just a component. So it's a product roll-up. If you are developing an app and you are, let's say, an application for mobile communications, and let's say you want to really try to get it out there really quickly, you might approach somebody like Rogers or TELUS here in Canada, or Verizon or others in the US. And you might say, well, look, I'll brand it for you. Put it under your brand, not under my brand. People don't know me from Adam in the United States, so maybe I'll put it under my brand. So you could start with your brand, or you could just basically go right from the get-go and go over and do what's referred to as an OEM or a white labeling of your product. There are some puts and takes on that. One is that you tend to lose, you have much lower marketing and sales costs. You make a very, very much of an enterprise type sale. It's a very long sale because you've got to get a lot of people to approve. But you don't have to do all of the upfront brand building, communication to a lot of other people, a lot of different people. You can let Rogers or TELUS or whoever it is that you're selling to do that. They will carry the ball. But you have to show them how to sell the product. You have to show how your value will not only generate value for the customers, the users, but also generate value for Rogers or TELUS or the carrier. You have much less, don't have really any control on growth. It's whatever they sell, whatever that sales force uses. You have very limited pricing power because you're typically a startup selling to a great big elephant. And your partner will totally define what the roadmap is for product development. You will lose that control. You have to respond to them. They are the customer, the big carrier. Selling to them in an indirect relationship is very hard. I'm not going to really go there. Just trust me, it's a very hard thing to do. Under your brand, you've got two options, which are direct versus indirect. So direct means belly-to-belly sales. In other words, I'm out there talking to directly with a customer. Or could be a website sale, where people are just coming onto your own website, you're driving traffic onto the website, people are signing up, bingo, buying your service. In either case, you have to build awareness. You have to develop that direct relationship. You have to develop that trust in your brand and in the product and in the promise that you have about what solution you're providing to the problems that the customers have. Okay. If you throw it out and you say, gee, I really just don't like sales. I don't want to be out there involved in sales. Why don't I just go and get a channel partner to do that? I've seen many companies, had to fix a number of companies that have done that, I'm going to say, too early. And the problem that you encounter is that you lose control of the growth. You lose control of the path of where your product is going. Everybody out there, every channel partner that you sign up has an agenda, what they like to do, which may not be for the same as what you originally constructed your product to do. And you get pulled in this direction, and this direction, and this direction. You end up spending a lot of time on product development because you have to in order to satisfy them. You end up spending a lot of time supporting customers. You end up building, and you don't have may not necessarily have the volume, the size, the scale to actually support it. And it can put you under. It still requires brand building because, as I explained, even though you're selling it through another retail outlet, for example, if you're talking about clothing, those retail outlets, unless it's your own store, and I don't think you're probably going to start your own store just yet, like Apple has, but if you're selling through some other retail outlet, whether it's Costco or whether it's the Bay or even if it's through Amazon, you still require your own brand building. You still require that investment in sales and marketing to get the communication, get the message out there, get the people aware. Yes, you get some help from them by saying, you know, I'm here. If you're selling through Apple or Amazon app stores, you get help from them, particularly if you get your volumes up and you are ranked as one of the #1 apps or whatever in the store. But you have to do that investment in your brand, in your product, so that people actually go to the web store and make that purchase, that channel partner purchase. Okay. What they do provide is they provide another level of trust. So by being in the Apple store or being in the Amazon store, it provides a certain sense of a relationship, of trust, that those people have vetted it. If they do the transaction through there, they know it's not going to get scammed or whatever. So it does remove some of the risk to a buyer. So that can be a good thing. Right? But it doesn't remove the obligation from you to build your own brand. So, if we're looking at your startup sales strategy, yes?
Can you go back to the previous slide again?
Yep.
Can you just give us an example of a direct white label and an indirect white label?
Well, a direct white label. Let's say you have the biggest example, and on the direct white label, I've created a product. Let's say it's a SaaS product. I might be doing some of the sales already through a brand, my own brand, but I've now taken it and I've skinned it so that it can be sold by a much bigger company in the United States or in Europe. I now want to take that product to China. I don't have anybody on my team that is capable. So I've successfully sold it as an OEM product, a white label product in North America and in Europe, in English language speaking places, let's say. I now go to China. I want to go to China because I see that's a huge market and the mobile world is expanding tremendously there. I can't do it because I don't have anybody that's either there. I can't provide the support directly to them in that country. And so I find a partner that's in China that speaks the language, that doesn't have doesn't have the language, not only the language barrier, but also the time zone barriers, can provide technical support directly to the carriers in that location or to the, whatever it is the application is that you're selling to. Okay, so you're going from here to a channel partner that's there who is probably providing a regulatory and language value, which allows you then to get into that particular market.
So that's direct, right?
No, that's indirect. So I'm giving them the opportunity to sell my product as an OEM.
So would licensing be like an example? Would like selling a license?
Licensing would be very similar.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Licensing or royalty application would be a very similar type of activity. Okay, so in those cases, what you're hopefully doing is it's add-on. You're doing it to add on. It's hard for a startup to get there because it requires a fairly mature product. Something that you can go after in the, as we say, the long tail of the business. Okay, so startup sales strategy. You have to remember that every person in the value chain has a different WIFM, a different value driver, and every different value driver will push features, pricing, packaging, support, and a bunch of other things. Your whole customer relationship, how you deal with them. It may even be things like language and regulation that is in there. So all of your customer, all your information is with the customer, right? It's what we talk about customer discovery, customer discovery, customer discovery. So you got to get out of the building, and I think my recommendation is you look long and hard before you move away from a direct sales strategy as a startup. You need the tightest links to the customer. You need the tightest feedback, the shortest time frame between getting it to them, getting feedback into your company, adjusting, until you have that very repeatable, scalable sales model. Now there are some considerations which you've got to think about, and that is cost. So what is your cost of doing the selling? But as a startup, keep in mind, this is no excuse to go and hire the VP of sales. Right? As a startup, you need to get out there and do the discovery and do the discussions. So as your business gets into that more, I'm going to say, crossing the chasm stage, you start to look at things like your customer acquisition costs. You start to want to compare that to what the revenue is that's coming in. So you've got to balance that customer acquisition cost with the revenue, and you've got to make sure that your lifetime value of the customer, which is the LTV, or the ARPU, the average revenue per unit sold, are much, much greater than the acquisition cost, or you're going to go out of business. Right? In a mature business, often you're going to have a blend of a whole bunch of different sales strategies, some direct and some indirect or OEM type business. But as a startup, you've got to look long and hard at moving away from a direct sales approach at this stage. You need to understand. You need to understand how difficult it is. You need to understand how much time it takes, how much money is invested in the acquisition in terms of your marketing costs, your lead generation costs. You're only going to find that out if you have your hands on the wheel initially. You've got to figure out what is the repeatable sales process. How much does that repeatable sales process cost? very, very key component to understanding whether you can actually cross the chasm if you're in a high growth or technology business, which has a significant chasm of barrier to adoption. Your revenue, your lifetime value of revenue, is the value of your revenue less your costs to support that revenue. So those could be, in case of a software as a service company, all of your customer support costs, the onboarding costs of getting somebody in, and any costs of churn. So if you're running a software as a service and you've got a 40% churn, then the lifetime value isn't very long, because over a matter of 3 years, you will have virtually no customers left that you started with 3 years prior. So churn is a huge factor in calculating what your cost is. In other words, don't just take what your pricing is and multiply it times 36 months or something like that and assume that that's what your lifetime value of your customer is. It isn't. You've got to take away the costs of supporting it, and you've got to look at the churn factor, which is basically the probability that they're actually going to stay around for 3 years. And in the average revenue per unit, which is, I'm going to say if you're talking about a product, you can look at not only the selling price, but the installation price, the ongoing support costs. You might have spare parts that you're selling them after the sale has been made. And even in the case of software, if you're selling software that is an upfront sale or an enterprise type sale as opposed to software as a service, there's an ongoing support cost that may be factored into that as well. So those are all on the revenue side, and as I said, we definitely want to have that a lot larger than the customer acquisition costs. Generally speaking, if you're looking at, you can go and look at a lot of information in various public companies and look at what the relationship between revenue and sales, or what revenue and marketing and sales costs are. Sometimes they're blended in there with administrative costs as well as sales and marketing costs. But have a look at what those are on a long-term basis, so that when you're doing your financial plan, looking out a few years, you actually have a realistic number of marketing selling costs relative to your sales, or more importantly, relative to your gross margin that you're actually generating on your business. Shift gears a little bit, get you on doing some math. Who knows what this equation says? Somebody's getting pretty close. Good. Leads times conversion rate times price equals revenue. Thanks to Dave Thomas, who articulated that last year. In other words, your sales forecast is not, here's the total market, I'm going to get this percentage of the market, therefore my revenue is going to be such and such. Don't go there. Don't go there. You have to look at how are you generating, what's your investment in leads and lead generation, how effective are you at converting those leads into buyers, what's your price, and that gives you what your revenue is. So as a salesperson or as a CEO, you're really looking at how can I possibly increase revenue? How can I increase that R? Now the price is pretty much defined by the marketplace, right? It's how much value are you creating? How much value, what's the difference between what's out there in the marketplace today and the savings, in other words, the value that you're providing to customers, and how are you sharing that with others? What's the competitor out there doing? So we really have to focus, if we're looking from a sales perspective, how can we affect leads and how can we affect that conversion price? So leads is about awareness, which is partly a marketing job. And we want to make sure the positioning is correct. But we, in talking with customers constantly, right? We're always talking with customers as either the CEO or the head of sales or business development. We need to provide feedback to marketing to adjust the message all the time. They may not be talking to customers as much as we are. So we have a role in providing feedback. We are the customer's representative back to the company to keep the company on course on what's going on. The conversion factor is our effectiveness in getting agreement. That's our closing rate, right? That's how good we are at taking somebody who has come in and making sure that we can get the yeses from all the various buyers that are in that group. So there's a couple of different things that we can do to optimize the leads that are coming in and the conversion rate. And one is that we want to understand is, back to the context of the customer, is what is the job that the customer is asking us to do? What is he asking our product to do for them? And the second is, we all know that we're writing a positioning statement for a target market, particular segment of the market. But what's the sweet spot of that market? So I'm just going to show you a little video here called The Milkshake Problem. And bear with me, I'll try to get this done correctly.
Hi, my name's Clay Christensen. I'm a professor at the Harvard Business School. I brought with me a set of puzzles, all related to innovation. We decided that the way we teach marketing is at the core of what makes motivation difficult to achieve. The most helpful way we've thought of it so far is that we actually hire products to do things for us. And understanding what job we have to do in our lives for which we would hire a product is really the key to cracking this problem of motivating customers to buy what we're offering. So I wanted just to tell you a story about a project we did for one of the big fast food restaurants. They were trying to goose up the sales of their milkshakes. They had just studied this problem up the gazoo. They brought in customers who fit the profile of the quintessential milkshake consumer. And they'd give them samples and ask, could you tell us how we can improve our milkshakes so you'd buy more of them? Do you want it chocolatey or cheaper, chunky or chewier? They get very clear feedback. They would then improve the milkshake on those dimensions, and it had no impact on sales or profits whatsoever. So one of our colleagues went in with a different question on his mind, and that was, I wonder what job arises in people's lives that cause them to come to this restaurant to hire a milkshake. So we stood in a restaurant for 18 hours one day and just took very careful data. What time did they buy these milkshakes? What were they wearing? Were they alone? Did they buy other food with it? Did they eat it in the restaurant or drive off with it? It turned out that nearly half of the milkshakes were sold before 8 o'clock in the morning. The people who bought them were always alone. It was the only thing they bought, and they all got in the car and drove off with it. So to figure out what job they were trying to hire it to do, we came back the next day and stood outside the restaurant so we could confront these folks as they left, milkshake in hand. And in language that they could understand, we essentially asked, excuse me please, but I got to sort this puzzle out. What job were you trying to do for yourself that caused you to come here and hire that milkshake? And they'd struggle to answer, so we'd then help them by asking other questions like, well, think about the last time you were in the same situation, needing to get the same job done, but you didn't come here to hire a milkshake. What did you hire? And then as we put all of their answers together, it became clear that they all had the same job to do in the morning, and that is they had a long and boring drive to work. And they just needed something to do while they drove to keep the commute interesting. One hand had to be on the wheel, but somebody had given them another hand and there wasn't anything in it. And they just needed something to do while they drove. They weren't hungry yet, but they knew they'd be hungry by 10 o'clock. So they also wanted something that would just pump down there and stay for their morning. Good question. What do I hire when I do this job? You know, I've never framed the question that way before, but last Friday I hired a banana to do the job. Take my word for it, never hire bananas. They're gone in 3 minutes, you're hungry by 7:30. If you promise not to tell my wife, I probably hire donuts twice a week, but they don't do it well either. They're gone fast, they crumb all over my clothes, they get my fingers gooey. Sometimes I hire bagels, but as you know, they're so dry and tasteless. Then I have to steer the car with my knees while I'm putting jam on them, and then if the phone rings, we got a crisis. I remember I hired a Snickers bar once, but I felt so guilty I've never hired Snickers again. Let me tell you, when I come here and hire this milkshake, it is so viscous that it easily takes me 20 minutes to suck it up that thin little straw. Who cares what the ingredients are? I don't. All I know is I'm full all morning and it fits right here in my cup holder. Well, it turns out that the milkshake does the job better than any of the competitors, which in the customer's minds are not Burger King milkshakes, but it's bananas, donuts, bagels, Snickers bars, coffee, and so on. But I hope you can see how, if you understand the job, how to improve the product becomes just obvious.
So how was the job of the milkshake discovered? Anyone?
Talking to customers.
Talking to customers. Customer discovery. Was this a startup? No. An established chain. Might have been Burger King, because he talked about Burger King, right? An established chain. The process of customer discovery never stops. So what functionality was being provided and what feelings were being satisfied? Anyone?
One is being busy with an empty hand.
Being busy with an empty hand. And the other was some level of satisfaction with your fact that you're not going to be hungry in very quickly. How often were the needs satisfied? Every morning. Every morning. Right? So, commonly, people would have, in the past, I mean, if you didn't have the benefit of this research, you would have said, oh, I'm going to package this with a burger, or I'm going to package this with something else, right? I'm going to offer a premium, I'm going to offer a special, and sort of when the people come in for lunch or when people come in for dinner. So the information which you get by talking with customers is absolutely invaluable. Like, you just have to have it. You can do all sorts of wrong, send your salespeople off. You as a CEO can waste immense resources without talking to customers, finding out actually what your product is being hired to do. So I just was talking with somebody at the break who has a restaurant business or a website. So think of this solution of what they did to find out what you might be able to do to improve your targeting in terms of improving growth in your business by understanding better what your product is being hired to do for your various customers. It may be in more than one market segment, in which case there may be multiple jobs that they're being hired to do. And you as a salesperson needs to understand that to communicate back to improve the product, to improve the sales. So you as a salesperson, as a CEO, or even if you're a VP of sales, whatever, you've got to get that communication coming back in. You are the customer's advocate. You need to ask the question, what are we being hired to do? Okay? Easy if you're a consulting company, but you don't think of it that way when you're a software as a service, certainly when you're a food products, where it's not evident of what you're actually being hired to do. So let's look at the other element that I talked about, which was the sweet spot. How do I get to that point or that portion of the target market which is really, really important to me? Let's use an electric car example. So let's look at, if we're doing a normal segmentation, we're going to look at some geographic attributes, and where you can see that we have various West Coast, East Coast, Central, various sizes of urban environments. How long do I typically drive on my regular commutes? And what type of drive do I have? May not want to run out of power if I'm on a busy bridge or something like that. So bridges may not be ideal. But do I have to do a ferry or a bridge or a freeway or city roads? So I can sort of look at that and say, okay, what do I think is the best? And maybe this is through a bunch of process of discovery. I just pick West Coast and I pick smaller urban, less than an hour's drive, and only on city drives for my commutes. So that's the geographic angle. Then we can look at some other attributes, which are demographic attributes. Again, we're talking about North American market, so who might be a likely buyer of a car, are they single, are they married, divorced, widowed, whatever, what's their income level, what's their education level, and maybe consider their political views. And again here, we're probably going to go after somebody who's married, maybe because they have 2 cars, or more likely to have 2 cars, higher income level, because my electric car right now is not cheap. I haven't got high volume. Probably have a fairly educated person, well-read, understanding what's going on, and pretty concerned about the environment, so they vote green. So we can put all of that into a set of attributes, 9 or 10 attributes in terms of the market, that define what this customer looks like. So that's my target market. That's my target market, right? But I want to understand, to get this sweet spot, I want to understand what is the situation, what's the contextual situation of somebody who is going to buy now. I am an urgent salesman. I am an urgent CEO. I'm type A. I want to make the sale now. I want to get going. I don't want somebody considering my car for 2 years. So what you really want is you want to understand and find the sweet spot, which are those people coming off of lease or about to buy whatever, they've got a second car, and they're going to buy another car within 6 months. So all of your positioning and everything and all of your discussion has to be oriented, to be efficient in sales, has to be oriented around talking to these people. I don't want to talk to somebody who's just bought a new car. I don't want to talk to somebody who's on a 4-year lease, not going to be looking at buying something. I don't want to talk to somebody who only is going to have 1 car, because electric car may not suit their needs. They're probably not going to be able to convince them that they can use that car to drive from here to the Okanagan to go on a vacation or go visit their friends or relatives there. Okay? So this is the sweet spot. A second car is in their minds, already in their minds. I haven't put it there, not me. It's already in their minds. I don't have to do that job. I'm not trying to wrench away and get them to sell their existing car. I just want to tackle and reach these people. And that's what successful selling is about positioning and understanding and finding out these needs, as opposed to just a blanket sale saying, everybody who is green should be buying my car. Okay? So the sweet spot, you know the customer, you know their job and their situation, and you focus exclusively on that. So let's get into this sales process, because we're all going to be successful. We all want to cross the chasm, and we're going to get into that very rapid growth area. And so let's look at what we have to do to run that process. There's 2 processes we have to worry about. One is enterprise sales, where we are going to hire salespeople, sales managers, who are going to engage, convert, measure, whatever, manage the opportunities as they go through them. They need to do lots of engagement with clients, lots of coaching with clients. You need to manage a team, potentially, if you're getting big enough. And then the other is digital media sales. So we can be direct, in other words, have an army of direct salespeople scattered all over the place to sell our products. Or we might actually be direct sales through a digital media group. And those enterprise sales might be as well with some channel partners elsewhere, but let's just keep this simple here. We're just thinking of a more direct to customer type of sales. So in the digital media sales, you don't have the belly-to-belly situation of people going out, meeting, shaking hands, whatever, or talking on the telephone directly. You have some domain expertise that is bringing the leads into your website, hopefully masses and numbers of them that are well suited to your product, well fit into that profile, fit in, and your messaging is so good on the sweet spot that people who need you are coming in. For example, you're selling accounting software and it's coming to the close to tax time. People have to do taxes. They have to get organized, so they're coming to you because they need to buy something right now. They got to file taxes within 3 months. So your process of signing them up is the conversion process, the selling, the closing of the deal. And probably somebody on your website, maybe through a chat group, maybe on a telephone, or maybe self-administered. And you need a whole bunch of analytics to measure and learn and improve on your operation. So we talk about managing the sales process. Some of our key sales concept is the concept particularly of a funnel. That you're managing opportunities through this funnel. And that begins with attracting people. And there are many stages which give you indication of where people are in the various, as they're working their way through the funnel. The top of the funnel is your target market. At the bottom is your customer. You're going to lose some people on the way to competition, disinterest, delay, whatever. But you're managing people through that funnel, and you need to efficiently determine what can crank up the improvement, what can crank up the conversion rates as you're going through. So in an enterprise sales funnel, we typically refer to the suspect, prospect, and client stages. That's the simplest form. More complex sales may have multiple forms. And you typically want to break down your funnel into areas where you know activities are going to happen in a short period of time so that you can understand whether progress is being made or not. You don't want to send your salesman off for, say, come back in 3 months and bring me the order. He'll come back in 3 months and there probably won't be an order, and then be another 3 months and another 3 months, and you'll get totally frustrated. You want to measure the progress of how you're completing, getting all of the people that are interested or that have a say or can possibly say no, getting all of those people aligned so that they actually buy from you and have a yes vote. So the funnel is measuring how likely a particular prospect is to close once they come into your funnel. Coming into the funnel means they're a lead at the top of the funnel. Out of the bottom as a client. And there are a series of measurable stages that you can go through on an enterprise sale. Yes?
How does this change in a named account model where you can iterate who your potential customers are?
How does it?
How does this shape it? How does your analysis change in a named account model where you can iterate who all your potential customers are?
I mean, I think unless if you're in a named account, you're still, even though you have an account, you haven't closed a sale. And so you still have to measure how close you are to actually improving a sale. That would be the same thing as selling more services to the same customer. You still want to go through the same analysis. What's different is at the top of the analysis is you've got a lead because you have an existing customer who's identified that they are interested potentially in buying more services from you. Still go through the same process. Okay, so the opportunities travel through measurable stages, and the transition from one stage to another is when you have specific things happening, specific things that are known or have happened as you go through there. So contacts made, improved contacts, knowledge about budget, confirmed interest, provided demonstrations, etc. In the digital or web, mobile sales field, a little bit different. Things happen a lot faster. The final people land on the website and bingo, they either click or maybe don't click, and you don't get a whole lot of time often to make the sale. But they may come in as a freemium, and then what you've got to try to do is monetize them and minimize the churn. Maximize the engagement once they're on there so that they don't churn out. So you've done a positioning statement, and or I hope you've done a positioning statement. And if you recall, there's a 6-line format. And the 6-line format actually relates directly to the funnel. Line 1 are all the people above the funnel. That's your target market. That's the people who you're communicating to. You haven't reached yet because they haven't confirmed interest and dropped in as a lead, which would be line 3 in your category. So you've hit them. If line 3 means they're a lead, they've said, yep, I'm looking for that. I'm looking for it. They drop from a lead down into an actual prospect when they've confirmed that you can actually satisfy, or you and competitors can satisfy that particular need. The benefit brings them either even further down from a suspect into a prospect. And then when you get evaluated relative to the competitive competition at the very bottom of the funnel, they either come out as a client, a customer, because your differentiator wins the day, or you lose them. Okay? So there's a very direct correlation here between your positioning statement and your value propositions and the actual stages walking through the funnel. You can very aligned. So above the funnel is lead generation. Your goal is to attract as many potential target market leads as you can handle. You have to balance quantity versus quality. And as I said, if you up the quality in terms of hitting the sweet spot of the target market, you up your conversion rates and you minimize your selling and marketing costs. Good positioning makes it easy for your customers to find you. That's why it's so critical to work on that positioning statement. Does it resonate with customers? Get their feedback. Get it emotional. The positioning statement is all about the emotion inside you. It should hit you in the gut or in the heart. It's not something which is a rational decision. If you find that your market is not closing, your customers are not closing with you, it's probably because you haven't hit them on the emotional side. You haven't actually uncovered yet what the emotional need is, what the urgency is, what the real pain in their side or their shoe is that is forcing them to actually buy. You haven't uncovered, obviously, the sweet spot in the marketplace. Lots of people will shake their heads, agree with you, whatever, on your value proposition. In other words, the rational. I'm going to say, yes, I agree you're going to save me money. Well, why don't you buy? Well, I don't need it right now. Right? They'll wait, and the sale will drag on and on and on. It's the emotional aspect of your sale which is going to allow people to make a decision right now. The lead generation is, every year that goes by, gets more and more important. The basic statistics, I think it was Dave Thomas that presented, was that 70 to 80% of the buying decision is made before they even come into your funnel. They're looking at who the competitors are. They know what the prices are. They know what the various solutions are. They know how quickly the delivery can be made. They're doing all of that on the internet, whereas 20 years ago, they would have had to contact you for that information. All this is being done behind your back or without you even talking to people these days. So it's so important to get your positioning on your website accurate, strong, on target, on message, and understand who's visiting your website, using the tools to uncover who it is that's actually coming to seek information from your website. So leads, enterprise leads are generated in some cases in the enterprise, certainly still by walking a trade show floor, running a conference, educating the marketplace about what your offering is. Might have a very technical product. You might have just had a client who has done an innovative thing up in Alberta where they've put RFID tags into these large access mats that they use for building energy projects, pipelines and transmission lines and things like that. And so they went down to the IEEE conference in San Diego as a new entrant into this sort of innovative company. It's a fairly new company, a couple of years old, getting some traction. And they spoke both to the energy industry people that were down there, and they got asked to participate in a startup challenge. They won the challenge. I mean, here's a little Canadian company going to an international conference of the IEEE, and they're presenting their solution, and they won basically the most innovative solution for a startup of using RFID technology. So those are the ways, with fairly little cost, that you can get tremendous exposure, right? By participating and educating in how you are applying the technology in your respective industries. In digital media, really important to get that the messaging right, obviously, on the website. All of your activity, your whole storefront is that website. Getting a good landing page and getting it designed correctly is absolutely critical. That's where you need to spend the money. It's not suitable just to sort of a do-it-yourselfer. Get somebody who understands and knows how to develop good images, clean, crisp, where you're capturing information so that you can use that information to refine and target your message so that the leads that come in get better and better as you get more and more activity. It's no good in doubling the activity on your website if the website is all the new people that are coming in are not in your target market. It doesn't help you at all. So in the funnel, and this is the enterprise funnel, we typically refer to the suspect, where the lead has been confirmed to be interested in your solution. The prospect we define as being, you've qualified the suspect and you've confirmed that you can meet their needs. You confirm that they have money, and they have a time frame in which to make a purchase. So, implication, you've definitely talked to them, and probably talked to a bunch more people inside the company as well to find out, again, what's the contextual situation in there? Who is interested in it? Who's the champion in it? Who's going to be your coach inside the organization? Who is a potential naysayer in there? Because you've got to find out who all the no's are that are potentially the no votes that are around, and find ways to neutralize them. And the closing, when they become a client, they don't become a client until they paid you money. A freemium user is not a client. Okay, so the prospect has selected you over the competition. You have the purchase order, probably got a down payment or a credit card number. So if you're looking at an enterprise, the transition key issue is transition from suspect to prospect is you understanding their pain, you verified their budget, you know them and why and what the time frame is to buy. And prospect to transition from prospect to close, the customer's confirmed that you won, the contract is signed, you know that there's been a board approval if it's necessary, you've got a deposit and or a credit card number. In other words, dollars in. In the digital media world, where it's totally website driven, sales are going to happen pretty quickly. Most are just click-throughs. And there are tools now which are being developed or being used and being enhanced continuously because of this issue of it all happening so fast. Now you actually do have cues. You know when people are landing on your website. You may have chat groups. You may be able to contact for live discussions or whatever. But there's very little negotiation that's available. The decision's going to be made very quickly, and either it's yes or it's no, and they're gone. Hence, you've got to be on target. You've got to make sure that you're getting the message out there that you want to attract the customers that need your services. So these are two distinct processes. They have measurement points all the way through, which is steps in the process which must be managed. Must be measured, in other words, in order to be managed. So sales is a process, the sales process is where suspects is a function of the target market, so accuracy in hitting the target market, times basically the awareness of the target market. So have you made 100% of your target market aware? Probably not, because your target market, people are coming in and out of it all the time. Hard to get 100%, but the higher percentage you can get, the better. Your prospects are a function of the number of suspects you have times your conversion rate, conversion percentages. And the clients are your prospects times your percentage closing. Now you can expand that out, but that is, I'm going to say, a minimum number of checkpoints that you need to have as you're going through a sales process to an enterprise type client. Whether you're selling a product, whether you're selling software as a service or another service, you need to have at least that minimum number of 3. I would encourage you to probably have a lot more. You'll know a lot more, you'll learn a lot more, and find out much more about your effectiveness of marketing if you collect more points along the way. So you need to establish measures for each of those stages and set a time and an expectation. After closing, well, after closing is selling too, because it's actually 85% less to sell to an extra dollar to an existing customer than it is to go out and find a new customer. It's foolish to ignore your existing base. And I think it was Dave that talked about the bowling pin strategy and how you can expand your business through adjacent market segments. So if you're going from geographic market to geographic market, then clearly you're going after new customers all the time. But when you're going down the product expansion, where you're expanding features or bringing out adjacent products or like products into the same market, that's where you have a great opportunity to sell additional services and products to your existing customers. It's very cost effective. It's not only cost effective in terms of actual dollars, it's cost effective in time, because you've already established the relationship, you've established the trust, you've probably talked to them or made them aware of what is happening to your, what's the roadmap of your product and how their new products or features can come out. What are your retention rates? What is your churn factor? There's always going to be some churn if you have a customer and if you're in a software as a service or a service business, because particularly in businesses, probably about a 10% business failure rate every year. So, and it'll vary depending upon which market you're going after. So there's some stuff that you can't avoid. You might be able to improve it by going after more sustainable businesses. In other words, adjust your market focus if you can. But those people that are disconnecting because of lack of engagement, dissatisfaction, or whatever, they're talking to them as worth its weight in gold because of the information you're going to get about how you can improve and retain those customers. You got to replace them is going to cost you money or customer acquisition cost. And if their churn starts raising, your lifetime value of those users is going down. What are your upsell dollars? What is your opportunity to sell added features once you get your minimum viable product out there? What else can you actually add on in order to create additional revenue opportunities for you as a business? And lastly, but very importantly, is what referencing are you receiving from your existing customer base? Remember, we're trying to create awareness and trust. References create both awareness and trust. You may not have talked to a customer, but somebody might hear about the fact that you've got this customer and they're happy about it, or they're on your website, or you've linked the fact the two websites are linked because you've told a story about them, or for that matter, you've just got a like on a Facebook website to indicate that they like your service. So referencing is after the fact. Satisfied customers, you want, as a sales organization, to go after customers, get them to talk about this service, and encourage them to be a reference and help you build your trust factor in the marketplace. And that grows your dollars, obviously, grows your bottom line. So here's a very busy chart, which I've used for a client that's in a software as a service business, and I'm not going to be able to walk you through it entirely, but it's in the documentation that you have that you can use as a reference piece. And the idea here is actually starting at the very beginning and saying, these are the number of ads that we want, and what are we experiencing in terms of churn, of gross ads and churn, because that's going to net out to what our net additions are. How are we getting our customers? Well, we're doing it directly and indirectly through app stores and also on our own website. So we have to look at certain measures that we're doing, certain drivers that are driving to our own website. And then we have the channel partners, which are, say, the Apple Store and Google Play Store. So how are these drivers happening? What are we doing, or what can we do to actually drive people into these particular locations? Every single one of these boxes needs to have somebody in the organization who owns it, who is responsible for that particular process. Checking on these involuntary terminations. Why is it happening? What are we doing? How can we adjust the customer success program in order to reduce this? And they have a critical number. The critical number is, I don't want to be any more than that number in any given time period. And you're measuring it on a week-by-week basis. Should be. My gross additions, I need to have X number of gross additions every single week. I need to keep my churn below a certain number every single week so that I make sure that my growth strategy is executed. Okay, so you should have numbers so that you can manage each one of these things. If you're not hitting the numbers that you've established, ask why, dig deep, make sure somebody's accountable for it. As you get into growing the business, you can't possibly be managing all of these things. So get owners to make sure that they are accountable for it. They will love it. Everybody wants to manage a component of your business, but they've got to understand what's the critical number and what their opportunity is to improve the process. The sales process in an enterprise is a little bit different, but I could draw the same flow chart. I could draw a very similar flow chart. It's going to be a little bit longer from beginning to end. It's certainly going to probably take a longer time period, but we have business development activities, and we want to measure these various characteristics. New meetings, number of referrals, networking activity, seminars and conferences that we've got out there, PR shows, what's happening with PR articles, what sort of notices are we getting in various technical journals if we're in a very technical sale. What's the interest level? What's coming in through our door, through our website? What's coming in terms of inbounds? Who do we have as being coached? In other words, we now have somebody that's confirmed interest inside a company. Who's coaching us on what's happening inside the company? Who is it that we have to get approvals for? Who is it that might be sensitive? Who is it that might lose their job? Who is it whose plant might get shut down because of our product? All of these things of people who could say no. You have to find out all of the people from this person inside the organization who could say no to the sale of your product or to the purchase of your product. Qualified. We know that we have now confirmed when they're qualified, confirmed their pain. We've confirmed that we meet the technical needs of their business. We've confirmed the timing of their solution and when they're going to make a deal because the other one, they've run out of their lease, or the other one's broken down, or they need to implement a new plant by such and such a time period. We know who the decision makers are, and we understand what the criteria are for making those decisions. When we're selected, we know that we've hit the requirements, and we know what the timing is for close. Being selected is not won the order. We're not closed yet. The deal's not done until the money's in the bank. Closed is when the contract is signed and the purchase order and deposit's been received. You still have an AR, still have an accounts receivable. That's when you go after the reference. The money has been totally paid, the solution is in, the installation is done, and now we're looking for a reference, an application note, a case study, whatever, that we can put on our website, they can put on their website, we can talk about it in a technical journal to the extent that we can disclose private information. So a little bit more lengthier process, certainly it takes longer in terms of time, but just the same, very measurable, that you want to establish a series of questions. And if you've got a salesperson, if you've got to the point where you now have somebody else doing the work for you, then you want to go through this with them. That's part of coaching the sales team and making sure that they're adhering to a process, a regimen that is a very disciplined approach to ensure that you get the dollars into the door as you need them. So here's a little chart that you can use, you can develop to look at. One is how much time is it going to take, and what strategies are you going to employ in order to affect the sales process. We have the direct approach, which using your own sales force, your own web, or your own maybe retail facilities. We have indirect. You can do a combination of both. I just showed you a software as a service example where the customer, where the business has a direct sale approach as well as a channel sale approach. And so you want to articulate here, what are the various measures, what are the various, in the case of a long enterprise sale, how much time is it taking to do that? What are your lead generation or your awareness objectives as you're going through there? What's your conversion objective from one place to the other? So think of it in terms of creating a map like this and figuring out how you can generate the number of leads, the success as you're moving down in order to get the number of sales that you have at the end. Remember that revenue is leads times conversion percentages times price. It's not the market is so big and I'm going to get 1% of it or 10% of it or whatever. Okay? It's based on activities, purposeful activities, and the way you keep them focused is understanding the different conversion rates through the process so that you continually fine-tune those elements. It's like the inner workings of a car. You know, the fuel coming in, the air coming in, how efficient the engine is working, how efficient the braking and the gearing and all that is working in the organization. Think of your business that way. And what are the key components? Some of these are going to be more important than others, depending upon what type of business you are. It's important that you understand what's the 80%, what's the 20% of the conversion factors in here that are going to give you 80% of your results. So at the break, somebody was asking me about IP, intellectual property. I think you had a presentation back perhaps a week or so ago. Tell you a little story. When I was with NBS Technologies, NBS manufactured the machines that make your credit cards, smart cards and all that sort of stuff. We sold them in 100 countries around the world. We had plants in France, UK, US, Canada, and sales and distribution arm in China. My predecessor launched a lawsuit for patent infringement on the software that we had to program your cards to our competitor. Our competitor was about 10 times larger than we were. So what happened was we launched the lawsuit, they countersued. They found things that they could countersue. I spent 4 years spending over $1 million a year in court with, well, not in court, but with lawyers, basically fighting this lawsuit. We had very, very good lawyers. We had the lawyer, guy Don Stout, who was the fellow who won a $650 million lawsuit against Research in Motion. He was our equipment lawyer, patent lawyer, right? But we could not make any progress on this patent against our major competitor. So I have heard, I think some of the venture capital guys talking about intellectual property. And I think Mike Volker identified it here, is the most important question that an investor is going to ask you is who will buy it, why they will buy it, and how much they will buy are the key questions. And these days, IP is traction in a target market. You can have patents up the yin-yang and spend all sorts of money on it. But it's really traction in the target market, in a focus market, that's going to drive the valuation of your company. And unless you have a ton of money to defend a patent, it's not going to really help you very much. Okay, so tying it all together, sales really is P2P, people to people. There's really no B2B, because it's down to the emotions of the buyers. That one person in that sale, out of maybe 30 people that you have to talk to in an enterprise sale, that has the veto right to say no, that will stop your sale. That's how important people-to-people selling is. And the same thing goes really when you're selling through a web. You have to make sure that you're attracting the right person, that you're understanding what their hot buttons are, what their emotional is, and what's going to pull them into your marketplace, into your funnel. So who is your who? Focus on who is your who, and let the other people come in along behind them. Focus your lead generation on your sweet spot. In other words, what's the situation that's going to cause them to buy in the short term? Not just on your target market. Focus on the sweet spot of your target market. Make your positioning so that your customers can find you, so you don't actually have to sell. Let them just buy. And that's, if you have a good positioning, that's where you'll be. And then clearly define your sales process and the measurements that you want to take so that you understand when you're on track with the sale or with the growth of your business and not on track. It's key for your resources. Far better to finance your business through revenue coming in than investors. It leaves a lot more for you. And lastly, it costs 7 times more to find a new customer than to sell $1 of revenue to an existing customer. So keep your customers happy, find ways to sell more revenue and satisfy them, and expand your business that way. All right, so the positioning statement is key to the emotional attachment to your customers, captures the heart through their needs. Your value proposition is the rational, the head part of it, and gives them an analysis or justification for the purchase. All right? Each sale is many, many buyers, and you've got to understand what's in it for them, what's in it for each person that has a vote on whether or not you buy. You've got to neutralize the no's. Focus, focus, focus on the sweet spot, and make sure you're managing your sales, because you can't manage, make sure you're measuring your sales activities, because you can't manage what you don't measure. There's a bunch of resources that I've identified here on various websites and things for you to look at, KPIs in order to help you figure out what it is. Go have a look at some of those, incorporate them into your business, and go sell. And good luck.